Welcome to the weekend edition of the Fast Five by Fear and Greed. I'm Michael Thompson, and hello, Sean Aylmer.
Hello, Michael.
Sean, on weekdays it's all about the Fast Five, so the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. On the weekend, we still obviously keep it to 5 minutes, but we're going to pick out the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, which is one that's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, and then our favourite story. So let's jump into it with the biggest story. What was it for you?
Look, one speech this week by the US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell changed the economic outlook totally. The world's most important central banker made it clear that it might be time to take the foot off the gas when it comes to interest rate hikes. That could happen as soon as 2 weeks' time when the Fed meets. Rates are still rising, but they just won't rise by as much. Suddenly, riskier assets become more attractive. Bitcoin rose, non-US dollar currencies like the Aussie dollar rose. Equity markets rose. The Fed and other central banks are only going to slow the pace of rate rises if they think they're containing inflation. Recent economic data suggests that might be happening. Jerome Powell's comments add to that. Big week, maybe a turning point week. We have to wait and see on that one.
Sean, for me this week, it was a massive week in Parliament in Canberra. I'll start with the big. There was so much happening, but I'll start with the biggest. The government secured the support of independent Senator David Pocock for its industrial relations legislation. In the end, it was won over by the government's commitment to review the adequacy of support payments annually. So that meant then that the legislation passed the Senate late on Thursday night. There are other parts of the legislation like banning pay secrecy clauses and capping fixed-term contracts, but businesses are really going to notice the changes in multi-employer bargaining, and there are certain exemptions for businesses with up to 20 staff, but employer groups are still not happy, warning that it might lead to more strikes and fewer jobs. Other big things happening this week in Parliament: the National Anti-Corruption Commission legislation was passed. Former Prime Minister Scott Morrison was censured by Parliament over the secret ministries scandal, and the government released a report showing that we're only on track to hit 40% greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030, not 43%, so we can prepare for more changes on that front to get the job done a little bit quicker. Huge week.
Sure was.
All right, most remarkable. For me, it was all about the property market this week. What we know for sure, we found out this week, is that house prices in capital cities across Australia fell by 1% last month, having now experienced the steepest fall, right, in 4 decades, now down about 7%. The pace is slowing, but it's still 8 months in a row. I think that is remarkable. But what happens next is the big question, and we have kind of very much differing views on this. You've got AMP chief economist Shane Oliver saying that he expects house prices to fall 15 to 20% peak to trough, with the bottom in the second half of next year. ANZ kind of agrees. Then you've got others like SQM Research saying that prices will actually rise next year. We also had Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe apologising this week for saying rates wouldn't rise until 2024 at the earliest. So really, in terms of the future in property, there's just so many question marks.
Sure was. Look, the Soccer World Cup makes the most remarkable story for me. Now, some of the big names in football are through to the final 16, some of the smaller ones as well, go Australia. But this week, a top official involved in the tournament said the number of worker deaths building the impressive stadiums and the infrastructure, the metro lines, etc., cost $200 million. Up to 500 people, mostly migrants, died during that process. I still just can't get my head around that, Michael. Remarkable.
Yeah, that really is, and really quite disturbing. All right, on to the sleeper story this week, Sean. What was it for you?
Was the news that Meta chief executive Mark Zuckerberg had a crack at the Apple App Store. Now, Zuckerberg said it was problematic for one company to be able to control what app experiences end up on a device. He basically said most of the money in the mobile ecosystem, or at least most of the profits, go to Apple. Of course, Meta's been hit by changes made by Apple when it tightened its privacy policies to restrict how users can be tracked and targeted with advertising. The point on this: Zuckerberg joins Elon Musk, he joins a bunch of banks complaining about the App Store. Why is it a sleeper? Because so far the tech giants haven't really had a crack at each other. They've competed but not complained. Apple has become such a dominant force, particularly in the US. The other big tech companies are now complaining. It's an irony that it's Facebook that's complaining about market power, but still the tech giants are having a go at each other. Incredible.
Yeah, it sure is. All right, on to the favourite story of the week. I've got a nomination for this one, Sean. And it's an international one. It's out of Japan, in fact, where COVID restrictions are being eased further. And now, how about this? Kids at school will be able to talk to each other again at lunch. for 3 years now, guidelines have been in place requiring students to eat alone at their desks and not to converse with others. 3 years, that's a very long time for these restrictions to have been in place. They've now changed, new guidelines issued designed to help get kids talking again. And it's just really kind of sad that they actually even need to do that. This is something that should come quite naturally. Japan's obviously been very successful at limiting COVID deaths, but to do it, they've had some really tough measures in place. We've only just got tourists being allowed back into the country. So I think for the impact that this is now going to have on those kids being able to talk to each other at lunchtime, it's my favourite story of the week.
Can't disagree with that. It's a great story.
All right, there we go. 5 minutes and pretty much everything you need to know in the world of business. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
We'll be back on Monday morning with the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Don't forget as well to check out our new podcast, How Do They Afford That?, featuring Canna Campbell, the founder of Sugar Mama TV, all about making your money work a little bit harder for you. I'm Michael Thompson, and this is the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed.